Pro Tem Devin Schaff, I'll be chairing tonight's meeting. Mayor Guyleen Castretta is absent due to a death in her family. She appreciates everyone's support and understanding during this difficult time. Councilmember Henkel will be joining the meeting late. Agendas for study sessions, including concept reviews, can be found visiting Broomfield's website at www.broomfield.org. Our agenda this evening includes 2 study session items. Seeing there are no concept reviews on the agenda this evening, there will not be any public comment. You can watch the study session live on Channel 8 and through video streaming on broomfield.org/council meetings. For our hard of hearing residents present, we have wireless headsets available through our AV team in the back of the council chambers. Election ballots have been mailed and are being accepted, and there's a drop box located outside this building, which is used as a polling place. Per state law, individuals may not advocate for the election or defeat of a candidate or a ballot measure, either inside a polling place or within 100 feet of the entrance to a polling place or drop box. That prohibition includes these council chambers because it is within the building. Additionally, individuals may not wear pins, t-shirts, hats, or other apparel that displays name or likeness of any candidate who is on the ballot or bearing the number, title, subject, or logo of a ballot issue or question that is on the ballot. We appreciate everyone's cooperation with the state law. Our first item this evening is an update from our staff on the status of the utility enterprise funds. Council has a copy of the agenda memorandum. I'll ask our staff to begin the discussion.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, and good evening, community and council. This is the third and final update for the year, given we started with the enterprise updates after the first quarter of 2026. We won't be discussing a deeper dive tonight on what we've done for the first reading of the budget and the enterprise rate increases that occurred last week, and then will occur again on the 28th. Rather, Mr. Rutt will be walking us through where those funds are spent, how they're spent, the difference between where we've been, where we are, where we're going with regards to the enterprise overall. And joining us this evening, it's quite the privilege to be able to have Flow members here this evening. I do believe the chair and vice chair are going to actually do the presentation for this evening and introduce the rest of the Flow members. Mr. Rutt, please introduce those folks and introduce us to the item this evening. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem and council members, Manager Hoffman. It's a pleasure to be here before you tonight and to provide this update for this very critical aspect of our services we provide to our community. Tonight, we're going to give you, next slide, sorry, that would help. We're going to give you a quick overview of where we're at in 2025, what we're looking at in planning in 2026, and then our schedule for our 26 updates will be in January, April, July, and October. So more to come as we continue our journey together. And then tonight, we're also going to cover a little bit on the enterprise related capital projects, where we're at with that, ongoing maintenance and operations programs, as well as our water supply, and a little update on our One Water initiative and how it relates to our future going forward. Give you an update on water conservation efforts, our public outreach, water systems, emergency preparedness, and our fiscal leadership. I saw I typed that wrong, financial leadership. That's supposed to be fiscal leadership on water, our Flow Advisory Committee. So with that, it is my pleasure to have our chair, Mr. Steve, come up forward and introduce the team and provide a few words to the council.
Mayor Pro Tem, council, and staff. On behalf of the committee, we'd like to thank you for this opportunity to serve on the council for Flow and on behalf of the community. And also a very special thanks to the Water Utility and Public Works leadership teams. They are a group of highly regarded professionals who have many years of experience and in-depth knowledge of the city's infrastructure, like decades. Introductions. The Flow Committee is made up of 7 members of varied backgrounds from city government, water facilities, engineering and long-range planning. We have Dr. Art Humble. And Art has a PhD in civil engineering with research emphasis in nutrient removal and recovery from municipal water supplies. He's a senior vice president for a large international engineering firm specializing in large water and wastewater utilities. Kevin Wagner. Kevin has a master's degree in civil engineering. He was a deputy director of public works for the city of Aurora with experience in wastewater and stormwater operations. Sam Taylor. You may remember him. He used to be on the council. Not distant past, Sam was also the chairman of the Charter Review Committee. Gary Bucky? Yes. Yes. He was a city manager for Lafayette for 45 years. Dr. Jeffrey Fredericks. He has a PhD in civil engineering and he's a water research engineer. He does a lot of international travel for water resources. The next is Crystal Kay. Chris is going to be our representative for the Planning and Comprehensive Plan and Review Committee. He has a lot of bullets, so if you want to come up and introduce yourself.
Sure. Hi, my name is Christopher Kay. I'm a professional civil engineer, currently a senior engineer working for a water technology company. Previously was a global product manager for leak detection solutions. Member of the ASCE and AWWA, and attend and present at their national conferences regularly. I live in Ward 3 with my family, and as Stephen said, I'm going to be representing the Flow Committee on the Comprehensive Plan Committee next year.
And that leaves me. I have a BS degree in geophysics and a BS degree in computer science. I'm a principal software engineer, section manager, software lead. I worked on proposals for large aerospace programs that involve planning, scheduling, staffing, and budgeting. These are $300 million a year programs for multiple years. So I'm very good at math, as is everybody on the team. As part of the final thoughts, again, on behalf of the committee, we thank you for this opportunity to serve.
So thank you, Steve and team for being here tonight. As you can hear, it is, they bring a lot of experience, a lot of knowledge, specifically related to water and wastewater and stormwater activities and budgeting and finances. So we are excited to work with them. They ask a lot of questions, and they've been really great and to work with, and look forward to our continuing developing that transparency and public awareness of our enterprise funds. So appreciate you guys being here tonight. All right, let's go back to slide 4, I think it is. All right, so moving on with the presentation, some of our key initiatives that I think reflect a lot of where the impact of our recent decisions and development of our rate increases and our staffing levels and other resources is one of them is our water meter replacement. Water meters obviously are critical in being able to make sure that we are accurately recording the usage. Right. And so older meters can have errors, and sometimes that error is in favor of the resident and sometimes the error is in favor of the city. So the importance of accurately recording those are critical, and we've been working with several community members as we are replacing their meters and ensuring accuracies. And just to let you know, we've had meters on the system currently that are over 20 years old, and the current meters were designed for 12 years. So one of the key initiatives on that related to our progress in 25 as we approved the budgets and the rate increases was our ability to now begin to fully implement our water meter replacement program that'll take over 12 years. The other item that we have noted here is the water line replacement. Prior to 2025, when we did the current water line replacement on Westlake, where we completed that project, was about 1.7 million, and we are in the process of completing the 136th Avenue water line replacement project. These were the first two water line replacement projects we were able to fully fund since 2021. So 22, 23, 24, we were not able to do any water line replacements due to the lack of funding. And prior to that, it was 2018. So if you take 2018 through 2025, this is only the third time we were able to fully fund our water line replacement program. Next slide. Other capital improvement projects or capital projects that we're working on, Chimney Hollow. As you may remember, we have about 29.4% share of the Chimney Hollow Reservoir. We are currently working alongside Northern Water on a naturally occurring uranium that has been discovered within the stormwater containment structures that was within the dam and also within the quarry that was used to mine the granite for the face of the dam. And so we're working closely with Northern Water and the engineers that they have. They have two different engineers that are working on the dam and the uranium studies, along with some sub-consultants. And so we are getting ready, Northern's getting ready to initiate a 1,800 acre foot test field that we have to do in compliance with our construction of the dam. There's some certain tests that we had to do within a certain time frame once the dam was finished, and that's what that 1,800 acre feet will be doing, is testing that pipeline, those valves, and so forth. There would be no discharge from the reservoir at this point, and it will allow them to do some additional studies as the water penetrates through the reservoir area. The next big item was Sienna Reservoir. That pump station and pipeline project is completed. It is fully operational, and we are finalizing the final punch list items, which means there's, we do a walkthrough with the contractor to make sure that everything was completed to design standards and our standards and specs. And so we'll be getting ready to make final payment on that project here, public notice of that project, and make final payment. The North Area tanks, this is another major and critical component of our water supply system. It is really to serve the East Area water zone, supply zone. So what am I talking about? That is everything from Main Street east to our boundaries, and from our 120th and sometimes down to 116th, depending on where you're at, all the way to our northeastern boundaries. So that is the east service area. And so this project is critical and part of our water bonds proposals for 2026. This project is currently needs for pressure demands of our, during peak flows and fire protection during the summer months, along with future growth and needs. Next slide. Other critical projects has been, this is the first year of the stormwater fee, which has significantly impacted our ability to maintain and operate our separate sanitary or stormwater system. So pretty much everything that's west of the Mississippi has separate water, sewer collection system and a separate stormwater collection system. Sewer is all piped to a wastewater treatment facility, where storm is discharged directly to streams without treatment. So we were within the stormwater fee that was established for 2025. We've been able to make some significant progress to deal with some stormwater rehab in the Miramonte, La Camora, and the Broomfield Plaza area. Also within, in 2026, we are planning rehabs along the Broomfield Heights, filing 1 and 2. And that's actually a significant increase of footage, and that's based on the size. So if you're wondering why we did 2,900 linear feet for 1.6, but we can do 6,000 at 1.2, it's the size of the pipes that we are rehabbing. And then the sewer side, we are in 2025, we are completed with, or 75% completed with the Midway Park project. And then in 2026, we have 4.3 million set aside in the budget proposal for 20,932 feet of clay pipe. And then another 32 or so manholes, or 26 manholes planned in 2026. This is due to mostly corrosion, as you can see in the photos. Those are corrugated pipe on the stormwater system and what it looks like after it's lined. And then the bottom picture is progress that we're making on the Sunridge lift station. So we were able to, right after our last update, the next day, of course, we got the easement agreement signed. Wouldn't you know? I tell you it's not signed, and then the next day we get it. But that has been signed, and we're moving forward. That's a picture of it about a week ago. This week, they've begun backfilling behind the concrete walls. So that project is on schedule and moving forward. The other lift station is under design, which is the Outlook lift station. Next slide. So the wastewater treatment facility is now under construction. We are moving forward with the phase one. Through a guaranteed maximum price agreement with our contractor Moltz. They were brought on through a competitive bidding process at a 30% design factor, and they have been working along city staff and the engineering design team to maximize our design and our cost efficiencies and constructability. And so they've been working alongside of us, and they have now broke ground, as the picture in the bottom shows, that they are now working on building what will be the new equalization basin, which is highly critical for our reuse flow and capacity. We'll be proposing to come back to council in March to do obviously the post-bond issuance of the full contract, and then also the extension of the phase 1B engineering contract. They'll be at the 30%, which is what council approved this year, and we'll be bringing forward an agreement to finish that design. Next slide. So some of the potable water distribution impacts that the resources provided through council's approval on the budgets and the rates is in 2022, we were only able to flush 19% of our water distribution system. In 2025, we were able to achieve 100%. That's 483 miles. Our fire hydrants, we have 4,478 of them. We have maintained 100% of them in 2025, where we were only able to do 47% in 2021, which is really critical for our ISO fire rating to maintain our hydrants twice a year. Valves, which are critical to limiting the impact of water breaks and being able to protect the water lines as they're being replaced and those type of things to move flow around those breaks or move flow around that water line replacement. There's almost 15,000 valves in the system. Through September, we had completed maintenance on 60% of them, and we are projected to be on track to finish 100% by year end. Backflow preventions, there's over 2,700 of those. And we're required by Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment to maintain at least 90% of these, and we're at 97.17 compliance right now. And that's critical as backflows are designed to prevent contamination coming back into the system. Contamination can come into your water system through low pressure, where the demands exceed the amount of volume of water and pressure in there. It could actually siphon through breaks in the line. different materials into your water line. So it is critical that we maintain our backflow, and that's why it's also critical for our water line replacement projects and leak identification, which one of our flow members is well educated in leak identification. And then we've cleaned 2 tanks, and we've inspected all 6 of our current water tanks. AWWA is, they recommend that we clean 2 tanks a year, and we have achieved that this year. Next slide. And then the certification, all of our operators, whether they are water treatment plant operators, our collection distribution team, and our wastewater folks are all current on their certifications. They're required to maintain through the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, which includes continuing education units that they must maintain and achieve before they renew every 3 years. On the sewer side of things, we're right now currently, we have video inspected 90% of our program goal, and by year end, we'll hit 100%. And if you look back in 2023, we were only able to achieve 20%. That is critical in our ability to maintain our aging infrastructure and identifying those leaks and protecting our community from sewer breaks and backups. It also includes the sewer cleaning. We're at 98%. It's a 2-year program to do the whole system every 2 years. That's 326 miles. And in the 2022, we were only able to do 40%. So you can see the repeating pattern here that over the last 2 years, with the additional resources and rate approvals, we have been able to impact the community by being fully functional in our maintenance activities and also in our capital replacement projects. Stormwater, again, and with that new program, we have been able to achieve 87%. We will hit 100% by the year end versus 9.6% in 2021. Cleaning, we hit 100% of our 2025 target, and we did 0 in 2021. Street sweeping, we've increased that by 95%, which is critical for keeping materials out of the inlets for the storm drains. We have swept over almost 3,400 miles this year to date. Next slide. Some additional, two things I want to point on this slide is the laboratory upgrade for our ammonia automation system. That had improved our ability to sample and get the analysis from 6 hours to 3 hours. And that is significant as we go through the system and as we're monitoring our wastewater compliance. The sooner we get the data, the more effective we are in our operational decisions. And the same thing on the water treatment side, they got what's called a Robar jar, which is an automatic jar testing, which is critical in how we evaluate our chemical dosage, coagulations, and so forth, and determining the proper dosage so we don't overdose or underdose, and we get proper removal. We went to an automation unit, and it reduced staff time from 4 hours to 50 minutes. Again, improving water quality overall because we were able to make quicker decisions operationally. And then we are continuing monitoring the PFAS rule, and which we have met the requirements. There are another round of sampling beginning in 2027 that we will have to proceed through. And then the Water Quality Control Division did pass their fee increases last Tuesday. And I think those are summarized in the memo of what those percents were. I forgot to make a note of that, but it's around 13% for most of those areas, water, wastewater, and stormwater. Next slide. Really what I want to show on this slide here is that even though we have a projected population of 2050 around 120,000 people, that our current water portfolio provides us enough water to meet that demand at that point. And that's a critical component that shows that over the years, Broomfield has been well prepared in ensuring that we have our water supplies available for our future. In addition on water conservation, we've seen a 16% drop per capita since 2012. Next slide. For this slide, AECOM did some benchmarking using the American Water Works Association 2024 benchmarking report. As you can see, and this is twofold, is we're currently at 2.35 staff members per 100 miles, and the median of AWWA survey was 5.68. Also on the water distribution side, the operation and maintenance budget, we're about 2.63 million per 100 miles, and the median is 3.36 million. And then on the sewer side, 3.31 staff per 100 miles, and the median is 13.24. And from an operational budget, ours is 1.36 million per 100 miles, and the median is $2.3 million. And so really what I wanted to show you there is that while we did provide some additional staffing and resources, our teams are very efficient, and our ability to increase technology and modernize our equipment that we use to do the TV inspections, the sewer cleaning, those type of things, has provided us the ability to be very efficient at performing those maintenance duties. As you can see, we went from some teens to 100%, and we're doing that with well under the median of the national average. And so, for our team, I give them all the credit. They are very dedicated to this community and are very professional in what they do. They go out of their way to work with the residents, as we went today, as we are trying to troubleshoot a few items for a couple of residents today. Turned out to be within their own apartment building, and we were able to get them working with the management agency of that apartment complex. And so that's the type of customer service that our team provides, is they're willing to take the extra steps, and yet we still achieve our goals. Future One Water Initiative, which really is a integrated approach that unifies our drinking water, wastewater, stormwater reuse, and our watershed management into a single strategy. We have partnered with Carollo Engineers on this self-assessment framework. They completed the one for Denver Water, and they're currently working on one for the city of Fort Collins. And if memory serves me right, I don't think Carollo did it, but I think the city of Aurora finished their one water program. So next slide. So this is kind of a photo or a graphic that shows, this is just on the water side of all the integration that we are looking at and how they impact our community, and why we're trying to not only this part, this is just showing you the water side, but how we're also using information from community development and planning, and our economic development team, and our economists, and our finance team, and working together to come up with data-driven decisions and to ensure that we're integrating all pieces together to make high-level decisions. And on the water side, we were able to do that for less than a penny a gallon from Granby to your home. Next slide. Water system emergency preparedness. We just updated our emergency response plan. There was two parts earlier this year. If you remember, we said we updated our risk and resilience assessment, and we submitted that to the EPA. I believe that was due by the end of March. And then we had to submit an updated emergency response plan, which was due at the end of September. And the ERP evaluates all of our vulnerabilities, reduces our risks, and provides us with multiple standard operating procedures to allow staff to know what they're doing without having to have a manager right there, directing them during emergencies. And it does allow us to respond quicker. It allows us to respond more efficiently and more effectively. Next slide. Water conservation. 25 Year 25 has, year to date, we're 11% lower than 2024. We'll know more about that by February after our water resources do an analysis of what was the impact, how much of that was related to rain, moisture that we got in spring, and then we got a bunch here in September. How much of that was that impact, and how much was the water 3 days a week initiative that we took on this year. Our conservation programs, we had over 340 participants in the 2 webinars for WaterWise Yard webinars. We sold all of our 263 Garden in the Box. We had 36 projects on our lawn replacement program, including a large project that we partnered with our Parks Department and Krause Park. If you haven't seen that, they did a really amazing job of converting that non-functional turf into a really attractive landscaping area. Slow the flow sprinkler evaluations, we did 89 that were complete. We did 15 irrigation rain sensors. We gave those out, and 14 smart controllers were provided. We are looking at, I think, expanding that program in 2026, working through Resource Central. And then our water rebates for conservation devices, we did 196 total rebates issued, including 58 toilets and 58 smart irrigation controllers. Next slide. Just real quickly, this is what we've done for public outreach. One of the main initiatives that, as we've talked to council in the past about, is how do we become more transparent to our public, and what options are there for the public to learn about what Public Works does or water utilities do. And so here's a list of the different things. The Academy that was over May and June had 70+ residents engaged, and we're going to do that again. We're going to move it up to April and May instead of May and June. What we found was in June, everybody wants to go on vacation with their kids. And so our attendance weren't quite as good in June. So we're going to move it forward, which happens to line up really well with American Water Works Association Water Week, and also the Washington Water Call-In meetings. Here's a list of the various public outreaches. We had schools, HOAs. We have the monthly newsletter going out. We do monthly tours at the water plant beyond what we did at the Academy. So far, 172 residents have taken advantage of that. And we've been at some of the national. One of the cool things we did was the Summer Career Explorers. There were students from 8th grade to 11th grade. They went through the water treatment facility and some of the water distribution stuff. So it was that was really fun to see the kids because I'm an old guy, the youngsters go through that program. Next slide. Again, just to show a little bit of what Flo has processed through. And as we move forward, we'll begin to introduce them to the full budget process. And as we go through our enterprise budgets, which we will begin to start working and coordinating with finance in November, believe it or not. No rest for the water guys. We'll start that process in November, and the Flow Committee team will be step in step with us through that process. We expect that pretty much by May, the enterprise budgets will be worked through, and the Flow Committee will be fully involved and in depth of all the water projects. Next slide. So our next quarterly update is January 20th, which is a study session. And, in 2026, we want to continue with enhancing our abilities to be more transparent and engage with our community, and also continue developing and strengthening our data-driven decision-making. And that ends my presentation.
Well, thank you, Mr. Rett, for your presentation. Thank you to the members of Flow, all of the members of Flow, for being here tonight. Thank you to our public work staff that are in the back as well. We appreciate the great work that you do. We will now proceed with council questions or comments. Does any member of council have any questions or comments? And I see that we have a tie. All right, Councilmember Cohen, you're first.
Everybody. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Thank you for the report. And when you were just giving us the CVs of the Flow, it sort of reminded me of when we were choosing our health and housing boards, of the remarkable wealth of experience that's available to us. So thank you for serving. I appreciate you bringing all that experience and expertise to us. I wanted to ask you some questions about conservation, because a couple of things popped out in your presentation. Notably, 11% drop in consumption over this year, which we know affects revenue. This summer was not particularly hot. It was pretty average, and precipitation was actually a little below, about an inch below. So given it wasn't even a super hot year and consumption still went down, what do you attribute that to? And is that, I assume we're going to see lots of more conservation efforts from our residents, more lawn replacement. I know a lot of HOAs, at least I'm hearing from HOAs in Ward 5, very concerned about their large amounts of irrigated areas, and they want to not do that anymore. So can you just address how you're looking at the effect of future conservation will have?
Thank you for the question, Councilmember Cohen. It's a very good question. Yes, and that's one of the challenges that we face as water utility providers, is the impact of conservation, because it does reduce usage, which also reduces revenues. And how do you offset some of those fixed costs within the system that we have? But it's also a necessary piece of our water program, because without water conservation, Colorado probably is not going to meet the future needs. So we do need to have water conservation. So one of the critical steps that we are taking, along with Mark Laurie is our water resources superintendent, that he's starting on, is we're looking at, and that's all part of the One Water piece also, which is, what is our water plan? What is, updating the water plan, updating our water conservation plan, and looking at our vulnerability for droughts, our water use ordinance, and how all those pieces plug in together, and how do they impact the overall water usage? And then how do we address being able to provide the level of service and the water quality at a cost-effective price? And so all of those components play together as we move forward. And we do need to continue to improve our water conservation efforts. And so that's where our initial is. We're one of the main projects that Mark will be working on once we get the January or the December final bills, is looking at, okay, what was the overall moisture content for the year? How did that work over a 20-year period? Where were we at from a moisture content? And then what was the impact of our water conservation program? And looking at the different water usage through single families, multiple families, and those type of things, and looking and analyzing that data to determine what was the impact and what was the impact, so that we can come with a data-driven solution.
Well, do the projections that were before the council last week take into account any anticipated increase in conservation? And I'm assuming that when people get their bills in January, there'll be an even bigger push toward more conservation. More people are, just in anecdotally, my neighborhood, there's been 4 xeriscaping in the last year. Nothing for 10 years and now 4. And I think we'll see more of that. So, and I know the HOAs are looking to cut back substantially.
Mm-hmm.
So is that built into the projections, or are we going to have to come back and review if this conservation trend continues and revise what's been projected?
Yes, when we did our projections, we do include revisions to the level of water conservation and what the usage is. And that does provide us information for finance to evaluate as they look at the various rates and the impact. So for 2026, the rate we are proposing does include our water conservation program.
So do we have a projection of where we think do we think consumption will continue to drop year over year as conservation measures take hold, as more people zero escape, as the HOAs reduce, as people's meters become, and people just reduce their water usage because it costs more?
We do anticipate that there will be continued declines in usage. How much at this point? Because we haven't had a lot of feedback yet, other than we did hear from some HOAs who are really interested in getting rid of some of their non-functional turf. So we have heard from them a little bit, and so we are working through those projections with them. So a lot of it, just like development, we need their input to say how much you're going to reduce and what they are projecting will be their reduction. So we're
We
waiting.
don't
on
have
some
a
of that
number.
data.
We're not projecting anything at the moment.
Right now,
It's
we
not
don't have
built
all the
in.
data.
It might be something to challenge Flo to maybe look at. I'd be interested in hearing projection, what we think conservation will be. I think is going to increase dramatically every year as we increase rates, that more and more people are going to be reducing their water usage. And I know neighbors are talking about removing lots and lots of grass. And I know it takes a couple of years, the zero escape, people who zero escape this year probably won't see a reduction for 2 years. So we'll see, there'll be a delayed effect as well, I assume.
Right.
So I would be interested in hearing more going forward on how conservation is built into our projections. I had two other real quick things if I have time. The AECOM benchmarking where it's 3.31, I think it was, per 13 was the median, which is substantial. Is that sustainable? Is that due to the level of experience we have on staff now and that can't be replicated as they retire and we build new people in, or am I just reading too much into that? It just seems like an enormous gap between median and what we have.
Particularly on the sewer side.
Yeah.
The national average obviously is a national, and the East Coast is a little bit older than obviously we are in Broomfield. And so I think on the sewer side, the numbers are slightly higher. That's mostly because some of these systems are a little bit older than ours. As we continue to age, I do anticipate that we will need to increase our staffing level just because of the aging infrastructure.
So if we compared, if AECOM benchmarked to the state, there wouldn't be quite that big a gap.
And that's what we're trying to get some numbers from the areas of the state. And we do try to look at our surrounding communities and where they're at. And a lot of them are similar to where we are.
Okay. And one last little tiny question, just because it's in my backyard. The ultrasonic algae control that's been floating around the pond that I walk around every day, is it working?
Yes. Particularly the data that we have, because we put the one in Glasser Reservoir, this is the second season. And as we monitor the algae counts and the different forms of algae in the reservoir that forms, you can see a significant drop in not just during cold periods of the season or when it's more cloudy, but throughout the whole 12 months, you see a significant reduction in the amount of algae that's been generated. So yeah, it's been very effective. I know that City of Berthoud uses it, and a couple other community, Colorado Springs is using one. And so it's a newer technology, hasn't been around that long.
More effective than the floating grass pads?
Yes.
So the ducks and geese like the floating grass pads.
Yeah, that's why we also have the laser glass to keep them geese off of that thing.
The pelicans really love it too. All right, thank you.
You bet.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Thank you for this presentation tonight. I apologize, I was late. My daughter had a swim team meeting for her high school, so I had to stay and help with that. I'm helping with fundraising, so you can't leave early on those things. Thank you for the presentation. I love that we're working with AECOM, and is it Carollo Engineers? Is that how you pronounce it? Okay. Reading through this, I do want to piggyback a little bit on what Councilmember Cohen mentioned. I love the fact that we are, conducting the benchmarking study with AECOM, and looking at our water and sewer operations, and then using, it looks like, the American Water Works Association data. Us using less employees per 100 miles. I read all those benchmarks, and I did want to look at like Councilmember Cohen said, the employees normally is 13 per 100 miles, and Broomfield is at 3. I'm curious though, employees are different than contract workers. Are we hiring any contract workers then to fill in that gap that we're not counting as employees?
Well, we do contract the rehab sewer rehab, the lining, that is contracted. So those capital replacement projects for sewer line or the stormwater lining projects are all contracted. And then also the water line replacement itself is also contracted.
Okay.
And so we do not have a on-site construction team to perform those in-house at this point.
Okay.
One of the things we're trying to do is trend over the next 3 to 5 years. What is the trend on contractors versus if we were to create something internally?
Okay, I would like to see that included in the future data if it's possible.
Sure.
But I do like it that we're operating at substantially lower and fewer employees per mile. And, you know, for cost efficiency. I did notice that the budget too, I think was remarkably lower. The sewer budget as well. So just wanted to say that's great. I also don't want to be too lean and mean if we're not efficient, right? So I think that's important. So I read this part where it says Broomfield is partnering with Carollo Engineers to apply the One Water Self-Assessment Framework, which sounds amazing, to guide integrated water management. So what does that mean exactly? And how are we including flow in that process, or are we?
Yes, we'll be including flow. Right where we're now, we just kicked that off. We're in the process where Corolla will be meeting with our various departments. They have a list of about, I think, 12 questions that they'll be coordinating with each one. So they'll be meeting with Graham, our finance director, Matthew Deaver, city engineer, Jeff Romine. So they'll be meeting with the various different components, going through their basic question survey, and then along with folks within the utility departments. And so once they get all that survey together, then we'll be looking at, okay, what are the commonalities? What are some of the issues that were brought up by different folks? And how does that all begin to come together? So there's about 6 steps in that framework. And so we're in phase 1 of that 6 steps, and it's the information gathering.
Okay. Gotcha. I look forward to hearing that. That's
Yeah,
great.
it's exciting.
Yeah. So I'm curious too, as to, are there any future sort of projects on any automation or technology to enhance efficiency?
Yeah, one of the projects that we have actually in the 2026 budget under our automation and instrumentation and maintenance folks is to install 24-hour, 24/7, 365 monitors on our pressure reducing valves and get those tied into our SCADA system, which that allows us to trend, continuously trending, be able to have alarm set point to identify when pressures change. And that's one of the projects initiatives that we are planning to engage in 2026. And so there's 18 different pressure zones. And so we'll be automating that, and that'll be through a cellular, because we don't obviously put data lines out to everything, but that'll be through a cellular monitoring system.
Okay.
That's one of the big ones that we're doing.
Yeah, I would love to keep abreast on all of that. And then talking about the emergency response plan, is there any sort of vulnerabilities that we're seeing right now that maybe we have had happened in the past, like through a drought, but are we seeing any sort of vulnerabilities in our emergency response plan?
Well, we'll find out here shortly because EPA is going to come out and audit us. That's one of the things we did. We evaluated what are some of our vulnerabilities. Okay, so there's areas that have been classified through Wildlife Division of Wildlife where there's possibly increased fire potentials. So that's part of the analysis. Pressures, where are we having struggles with pressure during peak demands, water storage, those type of things were all evaluated as part of our vulnerability study. And one of the also issues is our supply, our water supply. What happens if there's a wildfire in our watershed? And how does that impact our ability to get water from Northern Water? And what is our alternatives? Whether it's through our contract with Denver Water, our interconnect agreement with the city of Westminster, and one of the other things we're looking at is also communicating with a couple other local cities and see about getting interconnects with them. So that way, if there is a an issue with a certain water supply and we were not able to use that water supply, whether it's a maintenance issue, which happens every few years with, call it our Northern Water. You know, they take down the system for a week, we go on Denver Water, and typically that happens in January or February when demands aren't that high. But if it happens in the summertime, how do you deal with that? And so part of that could be also coming before council with an emergency water restriction. And so there's procedures for how do we handle that.
All right, thank you. Just two more questions. I do want to hit, like Councilmember Cohen said, on the HOAs. I wasn't really thinking last time on the enterprise fund when I was asking about non-residential. I'm assuming that non-residential possibly means HOA as well. Is that what non-residential means?
Mark, give you a little more
Because I was
information.
told it was commercial, and then I thought later on, I'm wondering if it was HOA as non-residential.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Councilmember Henkel. Yeah, so in our billing system and the way we do forecasts, we do include irrigation of like common areas in HOAs and our non-residential use.
Okay.
And they are classified that way in our billing system.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that does. Thank you. Yeah, I would like to just engage more with HOAs and just kind of give direction in that sense, kind of what Councilmember Cohen was leading into and how we can educate them, because I think they're probably going to get hit the most. And then that hurts our residents too in paying, higher costs. So would like to just look into how do we work with our HOAs to help minimize water usage and also, any sort of drainage. I've seen on HOAs where there's water going everywhere. And we're always concerned, like, who do we call? Is this a city issue? Is this an HOA issue? Because things can happen like that. And my last question is how is Flow? I'm still trying to understand how Flow is interacting with all of this and informing the process. So can you just sort of explain a little bit how Flow is informing the process? Are you guys moving forward with certain initiatives and then asking Flow, or is Flow giving direction towards any future initiatives?
So basically the first 5 meetings that we've had with Flow is a lot of all the background. Okay, here's what we have from a water system standpoint. Here's what we have from a sewer standpoint and reuse and stormwater. And moving forward, our goal is to review and present the various different projects that we are proposing and going through and getting feedback from the Flow Committee, not only just mostly around the cost of the projects and how it's funded and did we look at the efficiencies or effectiveness of the programs and utilize, quite frankly, there's some really intelligent water folks on this team and utilize some of their input. They have great suggestions. I know they have indicated their desire to, once they get brought up to speed on everything, to be involved in, reaching back out to the communities. And so that's partly how they will be working together. And then as we get into the budget, obviously they will look at really from a fiscal perspective, what does that look like and what are the costs and does it make sense type of things.
Great. One more question then to piggyback, because you had mentioned this. Thank you for that. That's really helpful. 5 meetings on the history of water. That sounds exciting. I'm joking.
For these guys,
last-
it is.
Yeah, it is. I know some people really get into it. Water law, I took a 3-hour class on that. Holy smokes. The last question I have, because you mentioned it, is just the public outreach to the public. Is that going to be Flow's role and what will that look like?
The Flow Committee did talk a little bit at our last meeting about what does that look like for the committee? And they're working through that to determine how they can be transparent and involved in the community. So they're working through that as a committee. And then it is our hope and desire to also include them in some of our outreaches, whether that's National Night Out, whether it's the academies and bringing folks in, those type of things.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you. Councilmember Lim.
I'll start with my question on the Flow Committee in my couple questions. So I read through the minutes quickly where's my computer? For Flow. What wasn't posted yet, of course, were the minutes for the October 2nd meeting. And that was the one I was interested in when I saw that the agenda said that Flow was going to have a discussion of water rights purchases. So I'm interested in knowing what if they will have a role in those reviews of water right purchases. I know as council, we have not been involved in any of those reviews of water rights purchases. It has been entirely staff which has made those decisions. So now I was intrigued by that on their agenda.
Yeah, one of the action items for Flow is that staff will also include them in our review and evaluation of possible future acquisitions if needed or not needed. And they got about a 35-minute introduction to water rights.
Wow.
And have asked for some additional information. And so we're putting together kind of a 101 type of thing on water rights and providing that documentation as a handout for them so that they can refer back to it. I imagine it'll be several pages long just to introduce Colorado water law is like a book. So basically, Colorado water right, is first in line, first in time type philosophy. So it's appropriated by who has it first. And that's considered senior water rights. And those who have it later is called junior water rights, basically, in short. And so it's more complicated than that, but in summary. So that basically means during drought situation, first in line gets the water and the rest of us don't. And so it's understanding what are some of those key principles and how that's developed. And so that's part of what we're providing for the Flow Committee.
Mr. Rutt and Councilmember Lim, if I could just jump in real quick about the role of Flow on the purchase of water rights, because it's in our code that has been delegated to the city manager. We have an ordinance on that. So their role, as we were talking about this, consistent with their other charges, would be advisory, and it would be a recommendation to the city manager. Until such time as that code provision would change. But it's in our code that it's not council's role to be involved with those purchases.
I can tell you that the city manager welcomes Flow's eyes and additional conversations after the last 4 years of work on the enterprise funds to get it to where it is. And we are really privileged to have this group seated from a committee perspective. I think it's a standalone from how all of the other city managers that I've had conversations with, having this, I don't want to say independent review board, but certainly an advisory board that has a deep dive on all things financial specifically, really does allow staff to have our eyes at the 50,000 foot, 30,000 foot, 20,000 foot, and more folks that are at the table that come from multidisciplined approach. We're always going to have a better product at the end.
Great. Thank you, committee. I had 2 questions that actually came from residents. So someone was asking me how long was our contract with Denver Water? That was the first question. And what was the advantage to having the contract with Denver Water versus doing our own water treatment? So I knew the basics to explain, having the 2 sources of water provides resiliency, and we do have a long-term contract with Denver Water. Then they proceeded to ask me, well, if Denver Water is more expensive, would it be possible at some point to redo the ratio? I think it's 60% Chimney Hollow, 40% Denver Water, or Great Northern Water, 60% Northern Water, 40% Denver Water. So can you explain the possibility of reducing costs in changing that ratio versus the risk to resiliency, I guess, is the way I would frame the conversation that the resident and I had.
Okay. Thank you for the question, Councilmember Lim. You're correct. Currently, 60% of our water is what we treat from Northern Water. 39.8 or something like that is from Denver Water. The contract was initiated back in the 1990s and really has no end date. So what the contract does allow is it provides us to take a minimum amount of water, which is 4,700 acre feet. And that's what we have to pay for whether we take it or don't take it. We got to pay for 4,700 acre feet. It does allow us to take up to 6,500 feet if needed. It also provides some peaking day flows where we can take up to 13.2 for 13.3 million gallons during a single day. I think we're limited to 3 or 4 days of that peak flow. So in case we needed to do maintenance on our system and weren't able to supply the rest of the water, we could go to Denver Water and they could provide us during higher flow months. So that's a really important benefit of this contract with Denver Water. Not only is it out of a different watershed basin, so it provides us some redundancy and reduces some vulnerability, whether it's wildfire or whether it's future Colorado River issues that are being negotiated between the upper basin and the lower basin states, and what that impact may be on the Colorado River, which is where our Northern water comes from, is Colorado River. And what are those impacts? So it's important that we have resiliency in our water supply. So Denver Water plays an important part of that, as does some of our Marshall Water that we own. So those pieces are critical in being able to meet emergency needs as needed. And so as the community grows, and our goal is to try to just take the minimum, which is that 4,700 acre feet. So as the community grows, that percentage will decrease, and Broomfield Water will become larger and larger, and the Denver Water will become a smaller percentage.
Okay, so that's good to know the plan for the future then.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
The other resident question was regarding street sweeping. So we were standing outside watching the leaves fall into the street, and the resident wanted to know if the crew engaged in more frequent street sweeping during the fall season, or is it just like a regular pace throughout the year? Because the resident was concerned that there wasn't enough street sweeping at this time of year.
Yeah, leaves are a challenge for residents and also for our stormwater staff. Because obviously we don't want the leaves into the stormwater system, because they do break down and they contribute to nutrients, which then in turn reduces or dissolve oxygen and causes other issues in the streams. So to answer the question, a long range around is that typically it's pretty much a normal sweeping cycle. We only have 4 street sweepers to get all of the streets. And then the other thing that we also do is after snow, and we use whatever snow melting materials, we also sweep after those, which is also required under the Air Quality Monitoring Act. And so we also have to sweep after snow events. So currently we do not necessarily have the staff or the equipment to also do leaf pickup at this point in time. We are evaluating potential options, which this year we did increase leaf gathering for residents who like to drop off their leaves at the tree limb drop-off cycle center. And then obviously Waste Connection also allows bags to be picked up. Of course, that's a additional cost to their service, but we are testing some equipment, and we'll see how that pans out. There are a few cities that do leaf pickup. I think one of the council members mentioned Grand Junction last year. So we are investigating what that looks like.
Councilmember Lim, your resident is very insightful. When we have these conversations about stormwater and adding a stormwater fee, part of that increase last year was $11 for stormwater. So these questions that we're talking about now between sweeping and runoff and drainage and paving, all go into that stormwater. So again, it all comes back to what level can we fund the enterprise in order to keep up, deliver, treat, and maximize where we need to be now and moving forward. So insightful question from, we should sweep more. People think more that street sweeping is aesthetic, that it just looks good, versus what the impact is, because that sweeping goes somewhere. Just like from development, the development runs somewhere, and that's into the stormwater. So we appreciate that resident's question.
Thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you, Councilmember Lim. Councilmember Nguyen.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Ms. Rutt, members of Flow, I just want to say thank you so much for being here, giving your time, and of course, giving us a presentation about this, because water is very urgent and it's very important for the sustainability of Broomfield. So my first question is going to be, it was mentioned that the water per capita has declined about 16% since 2010. And I guess what has led to that decline?
Thank you, Councilmember Nguyen, for the question. We actually started seeing that trend after 2002. That was when the big drought occurred in Colorado. And I think it's when water conservation and drought really got into people's consciousness for the first time. So we actually saw a downward trend starting in 2002, and it's continued really through today, but it was much steeper in those first 10 or 15 years. The reason we often cite that 2012 number is because we have better data starting at about 2012. So it's mostly been driven by people just being more aware of it, more conservation, a little bit less lawn, more efficient irrigation practices, all those things together.
And my follow-up question to that is, there's a lot of misconceptions with who uses the water, in Broomfield. And so I guess, who does use this water? Is it residents? Is it businesses? Or is it a combination of both?
I don't remember the numbers exactly off the top of my head, but a little more than half, it might even be a little higher than that, is residential use. And then if you break it down during the year, a little more than half of all of our water use in a year is for outdoor irrigation.
Thank you. Yeah, so that's good to know. And so my other questions are for aging infrastructure. It was mentioned that there are 4 lift stations from the 1980s. Are there any concerns or any issues that we should be aware of in the future, since they're, over 40 years old?
That's all part of our planning projects. We have, the water line replacement plan, sewer line plan. We also include our infrastructure such as lift stations, water booster stations, treatment plants, and so forth. And so we're just finishing up on the 4th of the 4 older lift stations. We're doing the design now. But one of the long-term capital projects we have, I think in 2027, is to start the design and rehab of the Interlochen water booster station as it's starting to age. So those are all part in our capital replacement program. And so we do outline when they need to be done and what are the steps and what year.
Thank you, Mr. Rutt. And my last question is going to be, it was mentioned that during the construction site controls and inspections that there were 25 verbal warnings and 52 charges premeditated. What are these warnings and what are these discharges mean?
I believe you're speaking to the stormwater
Yeah, that's correct.
inspections. So a lot of these have to center around new development. We're very assertive on inspecting new development because they do have the biggest impact because they have so many subcontractors on site. And so one of the biggest issues is tracking of mud off the site onto the roads. We hear from our community really quickly when that happens. So so that's actually a violation of the contractor's permit, stormwater permit. And so a lot of that has to do with tracking or best management practices of silt fence, wattles, those type of things that prevent runoff of the dirt and the silt from the site into the stormwater drain. So a lot of those violations are centered around, need to improve those devices. So a lot of time we'll give them a verbal, say, hey, you need to address this. And then when we come back and they haven't addressed it, that's when we issue the written citation. And that usually gets their attention and they usually take care of it.
I appreciate that, Mr. Rutt, and thank you so much for your team for making sure we have clean, healthy water. And again, my appreciation to Flow for your time and your efforts to continue to improve and, you know, the sustainability and of course the quality of life of Broomfield. So those are my questions, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Councilmember Nguyen. Councilmember Leslie, you're next.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Let me join my colleagues in congratulating you and the Flow team for their assistance and support. Very impressive work. You're doing a lot of catch up. I know city manager, and you have come before us on a number of occasions to help us understand how far behind we have been based on previous actions or lack of actions on previous councils. And so it's really wonderful to see how much you're doing to catch up. And then you've got new legislation and we've got new development, et cetera, et cetera. This past year, council did approve some modifications in the codes around grass in particular, how much of a yard can be grass, how much can be bluegrass versus other kinds of grasses. Are there any discussions, particularly with the Flow group, about further code enhancements? I'll call them enhancements in terms of sustainability. And I'm particularly concerned about trees. Trees take a lot of water. We have a lot of trees. They're not indigenous, most of them, to this part of the world. We were prairie. We were not forest, generally. And I'm concerned that that area is not really being looked at. We spend a lot of money replacing trees that die on our fairways and stuff, you know, the city's area. And they die because they're not indigenous. And of course, homeowners, we have the same problem. I've just cut down 2 trees this week that have been dead for a couple of years, and I've been too lazy to pull them up and cut them up, but now I have to replace them. Well, and it's an issue with the HOAs as well. That's where I'm going next. But is there any consideration yet? If not, I'd love to see you add this to your discussions, because I know you're primarily focused on I'll call it the technical issues around providing the water, handling the wastewater, stormwater, et cetera. And that's full-time, more than a full-time job. And again, congratulations on the efficiencies that you've been able to invoke. But we need guidance here at council level. What else can we be doing? I have used Resource Central. I had them remove my backyard grass, and I purchased a garden in the boxes, and I've been redoing my backyard. It's taken me 2 years, but I'm getting there. And I'm doing it all by myself. I haven't hired anybody to do it. And a lot of people in Anthem Ranch, I can say particularly, are xeriscaping their yards. And so I'm seeing an expansion of that. And we have a committee in Anthem Ranch of knowledgeable folks too, who know water, live in the community, and are trying to help our neighbors better manage their water usage. You know, we have a lot of water running down the roads, sometimes all times of the day. And I know you sent out that postcard last year. We had a little conversation about it to try to advise homeowners, you know, when to water and all that kind of stuff. And it's, I hope, having an effect. But where I'm going with all of this is working with HOAs. You mentioned that you've got a project to try to encourage HOAs to do more of the lawn replacement. You've got a big project and you're trying to encourage there. In my view, there's only so much you and your team can do in that regard. I think it needs to go to the city manager, working directly with the leadership of the HOAs so that there is kind of a greater sense of imperative. On the other hand, with the rising rates, as my colleagues have said, you know, there's going to be more willingness to do something to reduce, you know, our individual costs. But I'd love to hear a little bit more about what you're trying to do with the HOAs, what you're trying to do maybe in conjunction with the city manager, what you're doing with the Resource Central initiative, because, you know, I mean, that can just kind of flow, or it can get a pickup. And I think we need a pickup in that regard. And then third, about codes. Do you have any other plans to bring forward to us some additional codes around use of certain kinds of plants, but particularly trees. Because my concern is we just have so many trees here, and every developer that comes in front of us has 100 trees they want to plant along whatever thorough way or causeway or walkway they're putting in. And it just concerns me that we're overdoing, that part of it. Thank you.
Oh, I'll reach out to call a friend, our water resources, because he's been most involved with our planning department and the HOAs. So I'll turn it over to.
I didn't know you were going to turn it over to me for the whole question.
Not just one question. They're all.
Thank you, Councilmember Leslie, for the question. I have some answers to that. So in terms of outreach to HOAs, starting next year in 2026, Resource Central is going to have a new program that we are going to participate in. It has different functions, I guess I would say, and we're still sort of trying to pick and budget which ones we want them to do, but it is going to involve kind of them hand-holding HOA staff or HOA boards through assessing how much water they use and how much water they use on their landscape and where there may be opportunities for HOAs to remove and replace turf. And even doing some project planning for them, helping them not exactly design, but figure out where would be a good footprint to remove some turf and how much water would that save, how much would it cost. We're going to couple that with likely changing the structure of our turf replacement assistance program for HOAs. So try to increase that benefit a little bit. And then Resource Central is going to be able to bring to the table for HOAs on that account, CWCB, Colorado Water Conservation Board grant funding that will also help HOAs do some more turf replacement. So we're hoping all of this will help accelerate some more turf replacement among HOAs or even other large property owners like maybe some schools, that kind of thing. So we do plan that to be part of our program for 2026.
Any consideration of additional codes that council should consider?
I did work with community development on the landscape code that we put in place. I believe it was last year. I have not had any conversations with them about any. I think they are planning some updates. I'm going to look to Anna
Thank you. And council member, we do have one additional amendment coming forward, and it's regarding a non-functional turf that the city council will see either late this year or early in 2026. The species of trees is already addressed in the current ordinance, so that would affect any new developments. There are guidelines for which trees to utilize, and as you were hoping, they do address drought-tolerant species to make sure that they are low water usage as much as possible.
Yeah, thank you. I'm aware of that. It's just the existing neighborhoods, really, there's nothing there. And again, HOAs, we're supposed to be replacing trees that die, 2 in our backyard and across the, that strip between the road and the walkway and that kind of thing. And yet they keep dying, and so we keep having to replace them when I wonder the value of doing that. I mean, I know most of us, particularly from back east, love trees and we love all the pollen that they put out because it makes us feel like we're coughing back in the East Coast, not just here. But I think there's more work to be done there to reduce the water usage by our plants. So anything more that you all could recommend to the council in the future, I think would be very, very helpful.
Councilmember Leslie, I'm going to add a little complexity to that. And anytime in these developments, historic developments have site development plans that include the number of trees, the type of trees. So again, when we're looking at anything retroactively, the same number of folks that say, let's don't have trees, let's xeriscape, you're going to have that same number of folks in that HOA that say, the reason I moved here is because I like my green grass and I like those trees. So when we do have those existing STPs, it would have to be a modification and amendment that's brought forward in order to make that happen. So again, certainly something to consider and take under advisement. And the complexity of moving that forward is a little more than code and policy worthy.
Yeah, I appreciate that, City Manager. And I know from my own engagement with my colleagues, at the ranch, there's a lot of people that, as you said, want to keep it green and all that good stuff. But increasingly, there's more of a reality that we need to do some changes, but changing the site development plan becomes part of the barrier. And so I think the more assistance that could be provided to the leadership of HOAs, how to do that. And then, and if it has to go to a vote before the HOA community or whatever, that's fine. But I've found in my own discussions with colleagues that that becomes kind of a barrier, that talking to staff about how do we do that, well, it's almost like, well, you can't do that. And I know you can do it. And you and I have had that conversation. So I think more help there to the HOAs, more engagement, I think at your level with the HOA leaderships about, here's what, we're doing, here's what we can do to help. And here's how we think you could go forward with some of this stuff, because you're right, they get a lot of pressure inside and they may not be willing to move because of that, And then we also have the fire issues. Yeah.
Councilmember Leslie.
Thank you.
Your time's expired. If you want some more other questions, comments, if you can wait till the second round. Thank
Yeah.
you.
I think I'm finished. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Delgadillo.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I wanted to zoom in on the Public Works Academy and that sort of thing. I think a lot of my residents will be really interested in that, so I wanted to ask a few questions. First of all, when can we expect that information to be posted on the website? Can we also expect a Be in the Loop update to let us know when that sort of thing is happening? What can we expect?
So we are currently working with our communication team. There's a couple things we're working on is we're updating the website for water utilities to make that more user-friendly, easier to find things. So that is coming up. We should have that up and running within the next few months. I don't want to say 2 weeks because then I'll get in trouble. But that is coming up. And then we are planning to get the information out on the academies. It will be probably in the February communications because we don't want to get too far ahead of the game because they are going to be in April, probably the last 2-3 weeks of April and then into May. There's 7 or 8 sessions, so we want to try to get them all before the end of May. And then, of course, May, we have to juggle the graduation for high schools and so forth. So that's the project has probably come out in February when we probably get the communications.
Very helpful to know. And then what is the format for those sessions? I did actually look through our website and see kind of what we had done in the past, but could you summarize generally what the format is, what people should expect out of these sessions?
So all these sessions started out with a informational time where we presented a presentation and we had made communications so that the residents who were in attendance, we said, this is not a presentation, this is an engagement. We want you to ask questions. Even if it's on slide 1, ask the question, right? And so we had some really good discussions through the presentations. And then those were followed up with tours of the facilities. Like in the water treatment, there was a tour of the facility. They demonstrated a few operational and laboratory type things. And then on the distribution and collections, that was really cool because they actually set up some stuff on site where they showed some of the pieces of broken pipe. And then what does it take to fix that pipe? What are the bands, or do you replace a whole stick of pipe? Is it just banded? And then we actually had the pipe exposed and what the trenching, the shoring looked like and what's all involved in for them to get down into the hole and make those repairs. And then on the sewer side, what the TV truck looks like and how do you put that into the sewer system, and then locates of how they locate water lines and sewer lines. So it was a lot of the hands-on stuff. For streets, they demonstrated how we crack seal and those type of things. So it was designed to be interactive and engaging with the residents. And that was our goal, is to get them involved and actually even touch, touch, feel, see, hear, try to use all the senses.
Awesome. I mean, that sounds like such a great session. And then the last question I have is, when do these typically occur? Weekdays, weekends? I'm just wondering how accessible this is for folks who may be working during the day are doing that?
If there's tours on the outside of the facility, like the water plant or the wastewater plant, there's outside. We tried to do those on Saturdays just because the springtime, the sun does set still pretty early. And so, but we did have a few on Wednesday evening. So we usually started those around 6 o'clock to allow folks to get off of work and get there. They usually lasted about 2 hours from 6 to 8 on a Wednesday evening. And then we did Saturdays from 9 to 11. Some folks hung out a little bit longer and asked more questions. But that's kind of what the schedule was. We tried to mix it a little bit. We did do another one, a second one on water distribution on a Monday night. It was in August, and partly for our flow team to come and see it firsthand. And then also we invited the public, and there was a few people from the public showed up also.
Awesome. Well, that,
Councilmember Delgadillo, I don't mean to interrupt, forgive me, but it's also in staff's best interest to communicate. This is very, as I'm looking at the staff in the back, very labor intensive. So it's not just one individual engaging. It's an entire team for Public Works. And so particularly based on the ratio of staffing, it's not one of those where, since they're going to have to stay 2 or 4 hours late, that they don't have to come in for those 2 to 4 hours. So these are phenomenally long days for our crew. And I can assure you that when the residents show up, they are so eager and committed to show off what it is that they do every day. But all of them are in the evening. And then they go a step beyond for those weekends. So it really is they're putting in 45, 50 hours a week during those weeks. And to have 7 of them, I know that from a staff perspective, Mr. Rutt was very excited to have a really well-rounded workshop scenario to where you didn't have to go to one in order to understand the other. But because that they weren't consistent, it really did tap every single one of these Public Works crews. So we are pumping up the volume from communication, not just from an outreach perspective, but also to maximize everybody's time and learning. And you know what that makes me think too, Councilmember Delgadillo, from our visit over at Broomfield Early Education, I didn't know that they offered childcare. So you've given me a great idea to be able to engage with Jessica to see if that would be something that we would be able to do on those evenings. And I will personally volunteer, not for the water piece, but certainly for the daycare, childcare piece.
Great. Thank you, Manager Hoffman. Well worth the interruption. So that's wonderful to hear that we're doing really all we can to make this accessible for our residents. That's awesome that this is weekends, evenings, so that everyone can engage with it. So those were all my questions. Thank you for all your work on this.
Thank you, Councilmember Delgadillo. Councilmember Anderson, you're next.
Thank you. I really don't have a lot of questions, but I did, after Councilmember Leslie asked about the HOAs. I just want a clarification. Is staff planning to proactively reach out to HOAs that have large turf areas that are being landscaped, or do the HOAs need to reach out? Was that more of a proactive move, or is that were they?
Mr. Laurie is making his way back down to the podium.
This is making his way. I would say that, and obviously Anthem Ranch, Anthem Highlands, they've been pretty proactive in engaging with staff to ask us to come and do presentations and so forth. So I think it's a partnership we're developing between the HOAs and leadership and staff. So I'll let Mark explain more.
Thank you for the question, Councilmember Anderson. So I think some of the marketing for that new program is still coming together in terms of how we're going to do the outreach and communications of it. But I know I know some of the strategies we're already thinking about is we do have HOAs that come to us for some of our rebate programs. So as we develop those contacts and those relationships, we're going to use those to reach out to them and let them know about this new opportunity. We do have relationships with a number of HOAs through our reuse system where there's just a little bit more, we have to have more regular involvement with them in terms of their use of reclaimed water. And so we'll reach out through those channels. And then as Ken said, we do have a number of HOAs that are already very proactive. We're in regular contact with Anthem Ranch, Anthem Highlands, Skystone, and a few other ones. But I know that Resource Central is working on a more structured, strategic outreach program, and they've asked us to be able to provide as much contact information for HOAs as we can give them. So they'll also do a lot of marketing and outreach to get that program idea out to HOAs and they can participate.
Okay, yeah, that's helpful. And I know is that connection to the reuse water because that was, I'm glad we're actually, that's a really good question. Are we over that hump with the reuse water was like a shock, the overuse of the reuse water a couple of years ago? Where are we at with that? Have most of the HOAs come within their limits? Getting close?
Yes, almost. Thank you again for that question. I'm trying to remember, we did the reuse surcharge analysis again last year. I think almost all of them got under their allocations last year. In fact, I think all of the HOAs did. We had a couple of other customers that exceeded a little bit. And one interesting thing we did this year, one new HOA or newer HOA did go over because they're in the first few years of landscape establishment. So they were using more than their allocation for the first year or two. But they did ask us to do a mid-year update. So they'd have, I think, it's just a little harder for them to, they have multiple tabs, they have multiple accounts. So it's a little harder for them to track all of their use across all the accounts. So they asked if we could do a mid-year update. So this August, we did do an analysis of use through, I guess it was July 31st, and sent all the reuse customers an update mid-year as to where they stood on their surcharge.
Okay, thank you. And then there's just a comment. I'm actually super excited, like just seeing everyone in the back row and moving forward. And I think we're not really to the point yet that where the exciting part comes, but as y'all digest this information and can come forward, I can't wait to see if the information that we have, over the years and from AECOM and all the studies we've done, if there's like pieces where you see flags where it's like, oh, that's like, we're being way too conservative or not conservative enough, or if they agree. And maybe there's this hopeful part where we finally have those water rates where they need to be, and maybe we're getting close to that place where we are in a really good position. So that's really what I'm more excited about. I'm very excited to hear that information back. So appreciate all of this information. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Anderson. For those of you that know me, know that I like to put Broomfield specific stickers on my Broomfield Blue water bottle. I got one of my newest stickers this last week from my wife, and it says, "I love water tanks." As my dad was a state water resource manager, water has been in my life a long time. I'd visit him at work. We would talk about stuff that I had no idea, but some of the knowledge sunk in, and I've been able to use it in the last 8 years. Buying a house in Broomfield near the water tanks up near Cole and Main Street, it's one of my favorite features of our neighborhood, and it's one of my favorite features of as I drive or walk the trails near the Ridge of Broomfield. Especially when they're lit up, it's a great feature. So I chuckled when she gave it to me because I truly do enjoy water tanks and water towers and everything water. I know that we're not talking about water rates tonight, but you mentioned, and I quote, "For all of these services, your water costs less than 1 penny per gallon." So when I heard that, I thought someone might ask, why then am I paying over $100 per month for my water if it all just costs 1 penny per gallon? So I know that perhaps this is going to be a conversation next week when we do talk about water rates, but if you could follow up with some information on that statement tonight, I think that would greatly help me, and I think that would help that statement add a little bit more to what you had to say about that.
So when we're looking at, the water delivery system is only one part of your utility bill. And so when you're looking at the average home uses about 9,000 gallons. So you take that penny times 9,000 gallons, you come up with, $90 or somewhere in that area. And then the rest of it is, how much do you really use? Because we do have a tier rate structure. And so if you go over 10,000 gallons, $9.99.99, you pay a little higher rate on your usage. And sometimes that increases your water bill. But in reality, I think a lot of times we look at our water bill, we say, well, we're paying $150, $160, $180, whatever it is. You got to remember that that includes your sewer rate. It also includes your stormwater rate. It also includes the environmental fee associated with regulatory requirements. And so all those pieces combine into our utility bill. And I think sometimes that gets credited just to the water because it's our water bill. But there is multi pieces within that water bill.
And thank you for that. I appreciate that. I knew there was additional information to that, but I appreciate that. So a lot of the status updates that you provided us in the various enterprise divisions were 100% or greatly outpacing previous years, which is great. You had talked a little bit about what's driving those numbers and what impact or what's driving those numbers. And a lot of that has to do with the increased rates that have been adjusted over the last few years. One of those was consumption. Another one of those was the base rates. So that's what's driving those. And I'm curious, what impact does this have on the enterprise system when we start to see 100%, that we've completed, all of our maintenance activities, when we fully funded our maintenance program, when we've, tested all of our hydrants, what impact does this have on the community and the information and maintenance that we will have to do in the following years?
Similar to, I would say, thank you for the question, Councilman or Mayor Pro Tem Chef. Similar to your car, right? If you got a brand new car, you don't have to pay as much in maintenance. You do your oil changes. And, if you hit 35,000, 40,000 miles, you change your tires. It's not much different in the water system. When it's brand new, there's not a lot of replacement. It's just maintaining. And by us catching up on that maintenance, it increases just like a car. When you do your oil changes and you do your preventative maintenance, it extends the life of your car, reduces possible future repairs, and when those repairs will happen. And so similar in a water system, if we're maintaining our system and we're doing the inspections and we're doing the cleanings and we're doing those things, one is we're able to identify where the weak spots are. Just like your 20-point inspection when you do your oil change and they go, hey, you need new brakes or, your fluids are low or whatever. It helps you catch a lot of those items that are about to happen. And so you can proactively address those. It helps you plan when these things need to be done, which is what the TV inspection program really does on the sewer and stormwater systems, is that it allows us a visual inside this underground utility to determine where are the weak spots. Are there cracks? Are there breaks? Is water infiltrating into the system? Which should identify there's a break or is there some blockage? Roots, talking about trees, roots causes significant problems in collection systems because somehow roots find their way into the sewer system really easily. And so it helps identify those various maintenance functions that in turn then help reduce backups into your home or backups into the environment. It also improves our ability to schedule maintenance, schedule capital replacements, and it provides us a level of efficiency and effectiveness that we're not trying to catch up. We're not behind the 8 ball, so to speak. We got this geyser coming up in the air that we need to address, and that's. Although maintenance programs won't necessarily stop that, but it does help us identify those hopefully prior to that time it happens.
Excellent, thank you. And it seems like that I'm tracking. So it seems that we've seen a lot of improvements within the enterprise water system with the increased community investment. And it is good to see that these new projects are coming online in the next few years, along with the increasing staff levels, although it does seem like these are below the national medium. It's not lost on me that without the continued investment out of the enterprise budget, and yes, that means increased water rates, we cannot make these investments in the system to be able to provide water. These projects, without that investment, these projects slow down or stop and we start to go backwards, it seems. Instead of increasing these numbers and feeling good about the system, we go the opposite way and start to have more problems. So, you know, we're tackling a backlog of maintenance while also increasing facilities to adhere to the growing population that we have, increasing commercial and retail users, and of course, those state and federal mandates that we have on this system. So it seems like we continue to move forward as long as we continue to have the investments, you know, the financial investments from our community to pay for these things. But without that investment, we start to slide backwards because we aren't able to do those projects. So I appreciate kind of walking me through that. The last question I had was around PFAS. So you talked about the next testing point for PFAS will be 2027. Will this be the final year of that PFAS testing, or will testing become less frequent after that 2027 should we test negative for PFAS?
Just recently, under the, about 2 months ago, EPA released the updated PFAS regulation. And so basically it's going to be about every 5 years. We'll have to retest and verify. And if you have a positive, then there's a accelerated testing schedule that you have to proceed through. Our last testing that we completed 2 years ago was below detection limit. So we didn't have to do any additional testing at that point. And so it's really a preventative measure, I think, on the rule is as long as you're testing below the detection limit, then you have a grace period until the next 5-year period. I believe it's 5 year, might be 3, but it's a period of time and then you have to retest.
Okay, so potentially if we test below limits, I guess is the term I should have used, in 2027, potentially we aren't testing again until 2030 or even 2032.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. That's good to know. That's all questions I have. Any other council member questions or comments on this agenda item? Well, Mr. Rutt and the team and Flow Committee, thank you all for your work. And we will be moving to the next agenda item. Our next agenda item this evening provides an update on the Broomfield Transit Study. Council has a copy of the agenda memorandum, and I'll ask our staff to begin the discussion.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I'm just going to provide a quick high level for this next, or introduction for this next item as Ms. Baxter is making her way to the podium. So the transit study that was, that is being.
If maybe we could have just a couple seconds while our committee and folks in the back go out, and then we'll try this again. Thank you for your patience online and in person. Yeah. All right, let's try this again. Ms. Bertonzetti, if you'll start again, please.
Thank you again, Mayor Pro Tem. So a quick high-level introduction before we get the item formally introduced by Ms. Baxter. The Broomfield Transit Study was initially directed for staff to begin this study back in 2019. And while this really is important work, a lot of things have changed since 2019. Obviously, the need for understanding our mobility and transit needs for Broomfield hasn't changed. But when this was originally undertaken and we chose to look at the gaps and consider a pilot study of which we were able to get some grant funding from DRCOG, which is great. But that grant funding at $400,000, as we all understand, does not come close to closing all of the gaps for our transit needs. So you'll hear this evening from our transportation staff some specific recommendations for how we could undertake a pilot study while understanding the fiscal constraints that we must work within, understanding the fiscal constraints also from RTD. Our staff is willing to consider and continue to fight for improved transit services for our residents, but they have some proposed specific recommendations for the pilot study to ensure that what we're undertaking can continue to be hopefully taken on by RTD and can continue into the future if it is found through the pilot study to be successful. So with that, I will hand it back over to Ms. Baxter to provide an overview of the study. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy City Manager Bertonzetti. Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and council members. Allison Baxter, Senior Transportation Planner. I'm joined by James Gherkin, Project Manager with Transportation Management and Design, a national transit planning firm that we use to help us with this study. Tonight, staff are going to provide an update on the Broomfield Transit Study and present the draft final report for review and feedback. Next slide, please. We'll begin with a quick recap of the study findings that we presented back in May. What we heard during our second round of community engagement this summer, and highlights from the final report, including the final recommendations and cost estimates, and conclude with next steps and council discussions. Our objective is to get feedback ahead of finalizing the study report, as well as how to allocate the remaining pilot funds, as Deputy Bertanzetti mentioned. So the pilot funds total approximately $400,000. Next slide, please. So the study kicked off last spring of 2024, and we had 2 rounds of public engagement. By the spring of this year, this team had developed draft recommendations, which were presented to the council in May. Since then, we conducted a second round of engagement, refined the recommendations, and developed a draft final report, which we're presenting to council for final input. Next slide. Just as a reminder, this study was launched at the request of the Transportation Forum and funded through the DRCOG TIP. The study findings confirmed what many residents are already experiencing. About 80% of Broomfield's land area is outside of a half-mile of fixed routes transit. The highest need areas, especially South Central Broomfield, are home to older adults, individuals with disabilities, lower income households, and are currently without access to fixed route transit. FlexRide is over capacity, with about 1 denial for every 3 or 4 completed trips in the Central Broomfield zone, and has limited evening and weekend availability. And North Broomfield and Interlochen in the Interlochen US 36 area are experiencing growth, which will continue to drive transit demand in the coming years. So these findings helped guide the study recommendations for mobility improvements. Next slide. Over the course of this study, the project team heard from more than 4,000 people. The team conducted 25 pop-up events, 4 focus groups that were attended by representatives from 34 different community organizations, 5 surveys with more than 1,100 responses, and nearly 4,000 project webpage visits. This level of participation gave the project team a clear sense of what residents value most, which is reliable, flexible mobility options that allow for travel with dignity and options beyond the single occupancy vehicle. Next slide. So during our second round of engagement, where we presented the draft recommendations, we heard strong support for the community connector fixed route bus service concept, but there was no clear preference between the proposed route options that we presented. There was also broad confirmation that both the FlexRide and the Easy Ride need enhancements. However, even with those improvements, feedback indicated that some gaps may still remain. So based on the feedback from the community and from council, the study recommendations were refined to include a potential trip support pilot, which would provide subsidized rides for older adults, residents with special mobility needs, and residents that are eligible for income-based services. A city contracted microtransit option as a way to give CCOB more flexibility and control outside of the RTD FlexRide system, and a stronger focus on advocacy for sustained service improvements through RTD for better access to ride and fixed route coverage in the community. Next slide. This is the mobility toolbox. This slide, these are the tools in the mobility toolbox where we try to match the market and potential demand with the right mobility product. Each service type plays a unique role, but costs vary greatly. The fixed route bus, like the Flatiron Flyer or Route 120, that's the most cost-efficient option at about $6 to $13 per passenger, but that requires strong, consistent ridership, typically at least 10 passengers per hour, and has limited flexibility but high capacity, whereas on-demand microtransit, such as FlexRide, costs about $20 to $40 per passenger, but that offers greater flexibility with limited capacity, typically about only 3 riders per hour. Advanced reservation or dial-a-ride services like Easy Ride are primarily for older adults and individuals with disabilities and cost closer to $50 to $60 per passenger and offer more driver assistance to passengers and trip customization, but typically are only one passenger per trip. So these costs also help us determine the return on investment for mobility options. Next slide. Moving into the recommendations and starting with the community connector concept, the study presents two potential alignments for the connector route, linking neighborhoods and schools to major destinations like the Broomfield Community Center, the Orchard Town Center commercial destinations along 120th, and the US 36 in Broomfield Transit Station. Because of schedule and resource constraints, the design requires the trade-off between serving the community center and the orchard. And while there isn't a preferred alignment defined in the study, this concept remains a key recommendation for Broomfield's future mobility network and strongly supported by the study findings and community outreach. Next slide. The 2030 vision brings everything together in a cohesive system. We see expanded flex ride service, consolidated zones coupled with longer evening hours, weekend service and connections to Wagon Road Park and Ride, a new local connector bus route, a future regional route along Colorado 7. And while not shown on the map, the vision also includes enhanced Easy Ride enhancements, improved accessorized service to key housing destinations, and ongoing policy and program work. Next slide, please. The ongoing policy and program recommendations are going to work to sustain progress, expanding education and marketing to boost awareness and rider confidence, strengthening first and last mile connections like sidewalks, bike connections and ADA improvements, planning for future growth in a way that supports transit-oriented development, continuing advocacy to ensure Broomfield's transit needs are prioritized in RTD's long-term planning. Next slide. This slide summarizes the estimated annual costs. So for example, expanding flex ride hours and capacity without zone consolidation would cost about $400,000 per year. However, consolidating all three zones would require more flex ride vehicles and to ensure adequate service levels and would be more costly. The community connector route would range between 1.3 to 2 million, and a city contracted micro transit service would have a similar cost of roughly 1.3 to 1.6 million. Meanwhile, Easy Ride enhancements, including new dispatch software and additional staffing, are modest investments. These numbers help illustrate what it would take to make meaningful progress on each of the recommendations. Because Broomfield residents already pay into the RTD base system and RTD is better suited for implementing fixed route bus service, it is recommended to advocate for RTD to include the route in their upcoming 5-year service plan, which will begin in 2026, with implementation beginning in 2028. Next slide, please. That leads into the pilot funding discussion. Right now, CCOB has $400,000 remaining in pilot funds. Staff's recommended use of those funds is to support RTD flex ride enhancements, which would provide immediate mobility benefits. Also, the Easy Ride program sometimes coordinates with Flex Ride to provide trips for its clients, so Flex Ride improvements would help take pressure off the Easy Ride service. The main risk is that currently it is undetermined if RTD would be willing to accept the funds and operationalize them in Broomfield, but we're confident that we can work with RTD to make sure that happens. Staff also explored a trip support pilot, essentially a ride voucher program for high-need residents, but that would require ongoing local funding to maintain beyond the pilot period and would be limited to a small subset of residents. And finally, using the funds as a local match for grants could stretch the dollars, but would complicate implementation because the funds are federal in nature. And again, this would require local dollars to sustain after the pilot funding expires. Staff believes supporting RTD flex ride enhancements in Broomfield would be the most prudent option in the existing and foreseeable fiscal climate. Next slide, please. Looking beyond the pilot, several funding opportunities are on the horizon. RTD's partnership program will open a new call for mobility projects in mid-2026. The Clean Transit Enterprise, created under Senate Bill 24230, will launch a competitive grant program. However, funding levels for that grant program are unknown, and Broomfield is not currently eligible for the formula funding program. We also anticipate the new Dr. Cog call for projects in 2026, and those funds typically support pilot and startup services. All of these grant opportunities would require local match contributions along with overmatch funds to implement larger mobility services. Most importantly, RTD's comprehensive operational analysis, RTD's 5-year service reimagining process will start next year and will give staff a major opportunity to advocate for expanded service in Broomfield without local funding expenditure. Next slide, please. In the coming months, staff will finalize the study report and work with RTD to amend our intergovernmental agreement to include the pilot project scope, once that's defined. At the same time, we'll continue to work through the RTD comprehensive operational analysis COA process to ensure Broomfield's priorities are represented. Next slide. We have 2 questions for council consideration, and staff are happy to answer any other questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Baxter, for your presentation. Council, it's 8 o'clock, or it's almost 8 o'clock right now. I suggest that we take our break before council discussion, and then we'll come back refreshed and ready to go for our council questions and comments. So it is 7:56. If we can be back at 8:10, that would be great. Thank you very much. Well, welcome back. Thank you, Council, for the break. And we left off after the presentation from our staff. Thank you again for the presentation. We are now to council comments and questions. Does any council member have any questions or comments? Councilmember Cohen, you're first again.
I'll get us going. Could you just review the 25 to 30% we can't serve those calls for the flex ride? Is that we don't have enough drivers, enough vehicles, or there's too high demand peak periods? Or can you just break that down? What's happening there?
Yeah, the trip denials are a combination of things. Sometimes the schedule is full. In some cases, the person's requesting a destination that's outside of the service area. And so, but in most cases, the schedule is full. So, and most of those denials are actually happening on Saturdays. So that's what tells us that we need increased weekend service because we're getting so many denials on Saturdays in the central Broomfield zone. There aren't as many denials in the North Broomfield or Interlochen zones. Most of the denials are in the Broomfield zone, that central zone, on Saturdays.
Primarily a date. It's not throughout the week. It's just because we don't have service on Saturday. Those are just
We have
we
service.
couldn't handle anyway.
Well, we have service on Saturdays. It's from, I think it's from 9 to 5. And there's only one vehicle operating. So we need an additional vehicle and longer service hours on Saturdays. So that's what those denials tell us.
So would the 400,000 would go how far?
According to our consultants, I'll let James talk, but that could get us all of our wish list items for capacity expansion, service hour, lengthening the service hours on the weekdays, adding Sunday service in the Broomfield zone, and adding an additional vehicle on Saturdays in the Broomfield zone. So that would be $400,000 annually. Yeah.
So we have funding for 1 year.
1 year, yeah.
Okay.
So you could split it. You could do, I think the highest priority items would be the improvements in the Broomfield zone, any improvements there. And you could, so we could increase the service hours, add weekend service for one to 3 years if you spread that $400,000 out. James, do you want to talk? Okay.
So are you recommending 400,000 1 year or recommending we spread this out or think that after 1 year we can find funding to maintain that level?
So the flex ride enhancements would be, RTD would be responsible for the flex ride enhancement. So we would have to work with them to see what they could feasibly or would like to implement and what would be most feasible. Based on our conversations with them, they are open to a number of the recommendations, but they need to keep in mind their fiscal constraints as well and the long-term sustainability of the service. So we are thinking 28 to 36 hours over the course of 2 years, the additional service hours, whether that be an additional vehicle or weekend service. And that would be about $150,000 per year for 2 years. And if they can sustain that after that pilot period, they would just fund it through their budgeting process. And we would not have to provide any local funding.
So what is the most likely scenario with RTD approval? Is the expanded hours to Saturday?
It's hard to say right now. I think they're most amenable to weekend service, adding weekend service, consolidating the North Broomfield and Central Broomfield zones, and potentially lengthening the weekday service hours to 9 p.m.
Okay. And I've heard before one complaint is we can't drive where they want to go. They want to go beyond Broomfield. Is that what is how many of those, does that constitute, how many calls does that constitute? And is there a way to address that reasonably?
We do get I think looking at the denial data and the requests, we saw some requests to Wagon Road Park and Ride. So we added that destination so that would be a point deviation out to the Wagon Road Park and Ride, and that would connect people in Eastern Broomfield to the rest of the regional transit network. So that's one one recommendation that sort of addresses that request. Also, the flex ride boundaries don't align with Broomfield city limits entirely. The North Broomfield zone serves the Orchard and all of the commercial destinations on I-25, as well as the Westminster Walmart on 136. So there are those destinations that are outside of Broomfield that the flex ride does serve. So, but yeah, not long distance trips outside of Broomfield limits.
Okay, thank you very much.
But one thing, sorry, one thing I should, Boulder County is doing a transit study and they're looking at doing a superflex, which would, a superflex ride service boundary that would encompass a lot of Boulder County and would actually have a pickup location at the Flatiron Crossing Station, Flatiron Station. So that's one thing that we're going to keep an eye on too for regional trips in Boulder County.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilmember Lim?
Yes. Is there a timeline, a deadline by which we have to spend the $400,000 grant fund?
Not that we're aware of, and if we amend the IGA, we would extend ideally the deadline for the use of the funds. So we have the funding and we need to look at the IGA, and as far as I know, there's not a deadline for the expenditure, and we could amend the years as part of the IGA amendment process.
I understand what you explained with the current situation with the greater return on investment with the flex ride. I'm skeptical about giving any more money to RTD. I mean, we all know we have not received our share of transportation for what we have paid in sales tax since 2001, I think it is. I feel like I should channel the mayor here.
Yes.
She's very good at naming the number, how much money we spend, and I can't think right now that RTD has from our sales taxes. And so now I explain from the staff's perspective why we should trust RTD with our $400,000 and think that they are going to do a good job in expanding this flex ride program.
I will start with the fact that the $400,000 is federal funding that we received through the DRCOG tip, and so it is difficult to operationalize because there are a lot of federal requirements on the dollars. So to make those, they come with a lot of administrative burden. So, and RTD is very familiar with requirements related to the funds, so they could potentially absorb them without a lot of staff burden. So that's one thought process to give the funding to RTD. Also, the $400,000 won't go very far and we will have to supplement the funding if we wanted to do a larger scale mobility pilot, like based on some of the cost estimates that we've gotten. So $400,000 won't go very far towards larger mobility services. But it's duly noted that the flex ride, we have had some success with grants, giving grants to the flex ride. That's how the Broomfield North Broomfield flex ride boundary was established. And we also were able to receive weekend service as a result of grant funding. So we have had success with allocating grant funds to RTD and having it operationalized with the flex ride service. So we're hoping for similar results.
Okay. So the easy ride options that were listed as medium term instead of short term. That's why I asked the first question about the time constraints on the grant usage of funding. So why did staff dismiss the easy ride expansion options and prefer the recommendation of the flex ride expansion?
Under the current fiscal climate, we have to be mindful of any service expansions that would require long-term sustainability of funding. So once the pilot funding expired and we had expanded Easy Ride, added staff, had an annual cost for the software, we would have to absorb those costs, and it would be an ongoing cost that would require local funding. So we wanted to be mindful of the fiscal climate. And so we decided, since we're part of the RTD district, and we do have a good working relationship with RTD's service planning, FlexRide service planning staff, we thought it would be the most prudent option to allocate the funding to RTD.
And you feel that when the time comes that FlexRide staff that you have a good relationship with will go to bat for Broomfield in advocating for RTD to take over the following years, because we only have funding for 1 year?
Well, we have had success with them absorbing the costs of the North Broomfield zone, as well as the weekend service. So that, I think it's certainly something that we've had success with in the past. So we would anticipate a similar result.
And so we will get the IGA, you said, if we approve this to go forward. And what levers of accountability will be in that IGA to make sure that we can address just not my skepticism, but I think residents' skepticism about giving money to RTD?
We would have all of the details outlined in the IGA, and we would have specific, like a specific plan for the implementation as part of the IGA, and the project scope would be in the IGA. So I think we would have pretty enforceable limits and accountability within that.
Okay.
Sarah, did you want?
And Councilmember Lim, just to manage expectations, while we say the operative word being anticipate, an equally important word is hope. We hope that they absorb this, but certainly the guidance to council, how strongly you want to base the yes, no, or have us come back with a different alternative shouldn't be based on confidence, a high level of confidence that RTD is going to assume responsibility. Because what we don't want to happen is for council to make a decision based on a high level of confidence and then have it not come to fruition and then be thinking, I wish we would have done something else with that 400,000. So council has to be aware, even with the approval or direction to enter into that IGA, there is a possibility, not a probability, but a possibility that they will not absorb it. So the decision needs to be made independent of them absorbing that what is going to become a relied upon source of transportation. And the communication from staff just needs to be really clear that this is a temporary based on federal funding. And the hope is that RTD, because of the success, will assume responsibility. So again, that communication is key.
Okay, thank you. Those are my questions along that line. One other question. We're not proposing to go forward with the connector route right away, but I don't think anyone's going to go there. It's too much funding. But I did have a question about that. So why don't both options go through the future Civic Center / Broomfield Town Square? I don't get that. I mean, we want people to get to Broomfield whenever this developer finally moves forward. We are all holding our breath, and not hoping fiercely, that this goes forward. And why wouldn't we have this route go to Broomfield Town Square? I'm not sure why we have an option not to do that. It's going to be our downtown. Sales tax goes to Broomfield. So can you explain why that option isn't there in the one route?
Yeah, we had the two proposed routes. One, the design forced a trade-off that we tried to get 30-minute service with 3 vehicles. And so to serve the Broomfield Town Center and the Orchard Town Center would have necessitated a 4th vehicle to sustain 30-minute service. So we elected to force that trade-off between the Broom. But if we had funding, if, there was 2.5 million in funding, the idea, and there were 4 buses, then we would be able to serve both destinations.
Okay, well, if we have to deal with the limited funding and we have to pick one option, I would propose, we need to go with the option that goes to Broomfield Town Square. That's what we are all geared for. We're waiting and we want everybody to be able to get there. That's my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Lim, and council, just a note, and I'm not putting Councilmember Lim or Councilmember Cohen on the spot, but we do have questions from staff for consideration, and we as council need to provide direction to our staff with regard to at least the pursuing the flex ride enhancements with the available pilot funds. So please either now in your first round or in the second round, please provide some guidance. Thank you. And we'll go to Councilmember Nguyen.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. An email was sent yesterday by Kirsten Heiser of the Broomfield Housing Alliance that she wanted to express her thanks and appreciation to the Broomfield Transportation team. So, Ms. Baker and Ms. Allison, Ms. Grant, thank you so much for your work. And it was, again, the email itself expressed appreciation for expanding and improving paratransit services. With that said, would FlexRide continue to expand paratransit services and people on mobility issues, or I guess using mobility transportation?
Yes, FlexRide buses are ADA accessible. They have lifts and accommodate wheelchairs. So any FlexRide improvements would improve mobility for individuals with disabilities who use mobility devices.
Thank you. With that said, then, for my next question is for FlexRide enhancements. How many drivers are we talking about, and how many potential buses routes would FlexRide provide? Just because looking at the graph earlier, we saw that we would be increasing services by both Sundays, which we didn't have, and of course until 9 p.m.
Can you repeat that question? I apologize.
Yeah. How many drivers and buses would be in service for FlexRide?
Okay. I don't know the answer to that.
Hi, James Gerken with TMD, the consultant firm supporting Broomfield this project. So currently, RTD dedicates 4 vehicles to FlexRide in Broomfield, accounting for, I can't recall the specific number, somewhere in the teens % of the overall FlexRide service portfolio. And the recommendations would be to extend the hours with the existing vehicles so they'd be out for longer to meet mobility needs for people traveling later in the day. And then on weekends, adding a second vehicle to the main Broomfield zone. There's 2 on weekdays, but only 1 on Saturdays, hence what Allison was speaking to earlier about the higher level of denials, because you have similar demand on Saturdays, but only 1 vehicle out there. And then adding Sunday service with 2 as well to match the levels that would be proposed for Saturday and then what exists on weekdays.
Thank you. That answers my question. I really appreciate that. And my last question, building off of Councilmember Lim's thoughts on our relationship as a city and county to RTD. We have to offer the grant money, of course. Would RTD say no? Is there a possibility that they would decline this proposal, or?
There is a possibility they would decline the proposal, but we are sincerely hoping that that they would see the merit and that the study findings support this request. And we have given them grant funds for FlexRide improvements in the past, so we're hoping that they will be amenable to this. And if it can stretch multiple years, perhaps they'll be in a better fiscal environment in 2027 or 8 and would be able to absorb the improvements and enhancements without an issue. But sincerely hope is the correct word.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Those are my questions. And to answer for council consideration, Mayor Pro Tem, I do support the flex ride enhancements with available pilot funds, just because I do believe that these services would benefit Broomfielders. Broomfielders have already mentioned multiple times, including the surveys, that they want more public transportation. So I think that this would, again, enhance paratransit services and, of course, people who are in need of mobility services. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Marshall, you're next.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. So I want to talk about the Community Connector fixed transit. If we didn't go forward with the Flex Ride and use the money that we have on that, and we instead put it towards the fixed transit, what's the timeline on that and how does that look? Start with that.
There are limited funding sources for implementation of the fixed route community connector. What we would likely do, if that was the direction, would be to apply for the RTD partnership program. The limit on that is 900,000 for 3 years, so we would be short a good chunk of funding. So we would need overmatch to implement the service, a local overmatch. So that would be a likely step to implement the local connector route. But there are some additional considerations, especially related to the new transit stops. We would have to construct those to be ADA accessible, and we're proposing new transit stops. So we would need to take care of that, which could take some time. We would also have to provide ADA paratransit service within the boundary of the fixed route. That's a federal requirement, so we would have to figure that out, which would be very complex. And so those are the main considerations with regard to implementing the fixed route.
The paratransit that you mentioned, is that included in the cost estimate that is in the presentation?
No.
Do we have an estimate of how much additional that would be? And I guess why was that not included in the estimate that you gave us?
Well, it's a minor expansion of the so it would be, so RTD provides the ADA accessoride along the previous Route 128, so they still provide that, and the new route deviates slightly, so it's just a small inclusion. So it'd be a minor cost, but the complexity of, we would likely have to work with RTD to provide that service outside of the existing paratransit boundary.
Gotcha. Okay. What's the timeline? You mentioned the RTD partnership program. What's the timeline on that for getting those funds if we were to go that way?
There's a call in mid-2026 for 2027 funding.
Okay, so we're talking, so the money that we would have to come up with that's in addition to what they would provide would be in the 2027 budget year that we would have to come up with?
I believe so.
And when would be the cost needed for any infrastructure improvements?
So I think we could take a little bit of time to do the infrastructure improvements, and we're estimating those would cost about 500,000. So we would have to come up with that amount plus the amount for the local overmatch to implement the fixed route connector service.
Okay, and what is the timeline for the Flex Ride? We put that $400,000 into the Flex Ride. When does that service start?
If we amend the IGA, we could complete the IGA amendment within 6 months, and I don't believe we have a timeline for that as of now, but I believe it would be a shorter timeline than the fixed route.
Okay. I will echo Councilmember Lim's comment regarding the fixed route and needs to, I mean, in my opinion, any fixed route has to do the town square. I mean, that's just a necessity. If that means figuring out the funding for an additional bus, then that's what it means. So I guess my direction, and I know, take it for what it's worth because I'll be off council in a month and a half, but I would support going forward with the Flex Drive because it does seem like that is the short-term benefit to our residents. But I would also strongly encourage us to figure out the funding mechanisms, come back to council with funding mechanism options to do the commuter service, the fixed route, as soon as possible. So that's my thought. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Marshall. Councilmember Henkel.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. this is a long time coming. So this transit study is so much work and I just really want to appreciate and honor that work. It's been, like I said, a very long time. So I really appreciate it. I've always wondered where you've been. I'm like, where's she been? Oh yeah, she's been really hard at work doing a lot of things. So, your whole team has just been wonderful. The second thing I wanted to ask or just say is that I know that this didn't come up per se, but there is a transportation gap down in Arista towards the Jeffco schools down there with the families. So I know that this really addresses the aging population and other people that gave feedback, and I really appreciate that. I just wanted to put that on the record that we've had families saying, we can't get our kids to the schools, and we know that that's a school issue, but then the schools will say we don't have any transportation. So we're having a huge transportation desert down there. The second thing I did want to, or first thing I did want to ask is, how are we going to define success for this study? Are we looking at ridership growth? Are we looking at access, cost efficiency? Are we looking at connectivity? What are we going to use to define success of this?
It's a good question, and I don't know if we've defined that specifically. I think in my mind, we would define success as improved mobility for those that need it and rely on transit the most. We could define success by increased flex ride service hours that are placed in the Broomfield service area. So that could be one, or just the number of recommendations that are implemented over the horizon of the plan. But yeah, we'll think about that.
Yeah, I would like to sort of give direction on that, as far as measuring what we're trying to answer. So it sounds like people gave you feedback on what the problem is. And so if we can say, okay, here's the problem that we're solving that people gave us feedback on, that would be helpful. And so I don't know how we're going to track that, or if we could use even, certain tools for ridership and things like that. I think that'd be helpful. I do like FlexRide because you can actually track it through the app that they use. And if we're using the aging population too, I have talked with a few people about just the accessibility of, using your phone for that or calling ahead of time. I know that there's a lot of issues with having to call way in advance and knowing that. Just, I would like accessibility for that age group if we can. And the last thing is that I do understand the need to have ridership to the town square. And I was even thinking in the future when Front Range Passenger Rail comes, hopefully. We speak a lot in generalities in the future, but I would like to see these things happen first. So if we do build the town square and we are moving forward, then we start making those targets. But until then, I really think, hope isn't a strategy. We have to make sure that something's really in the ground. So let's just make sure that we're thinking of that. So yes, I do support staff pursuing FlexRide enhancements with the pilot funds, and then I gave my feedback already. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Hinkle. Councilmember Ward.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. To answer Councilmember Lim's question, we've contributed $95 million into fast tracks alone since 2005. I will channel the mayor and her distrust of RTD, and trust me, I have the same distrusts. Thank you so much for the presentation. My first question is kind of a piggyback off of Councilmember Hinkle's question, but in doing this transit needs study, were these the only things that came out of this study? Was the two potential routes for fixed route service with the potential for improvements with scheduling and kind of backroom software stuff for Easy Ride, Flex Ride, and then enhancements to Flex Ride, or were there other kind of deliverables that came out of this particular study?
The deliverable of the study is the final report, but there were some recommendations that were thrown out, that were suggested by the public and by staff. And really the short range planning horizon required prioritization of the most pressing needs first. So those are the recommendations that were included in the report. They're the most pressing needs first.
Okay.
And so a longer range plan could include other routes, could include, increased frequency on existing fixed routes, but those weren't identified as the most pressing needs.
Okay, and so those future ideas would have to come from, I assume, another study?
Well, they would probably be incorporated. And so, yeah, we just focused on the short range planning horizon. And so we would likely want a long range planning horizon for a transit study. And that might also be addressed in the transportation master plan that's coming up, that has a longer range look at where resources need to be allocated.
Okay, thank you. In terms of, I don't really have any other, well, I do have one other question. In the enhancements that were noted for flex ride services, particularly the Interlochen Westmore, are we going to advocate for the full inclusion of Skystone into that flex ride territory, which RTD has, I've been nagging them, put it politely, for at least 2.5 years, and they have done nothing. So is that part of the plan?
Yes, that is part of the plan. That's documented in the study, and that's documented in the transit vision map that includes the Skystone neighborhood.
Okay, and then if RTD decides that it does not want to take on these new improvements just right out of the gate, it says, no, we're not doing that. Is staff going to come, I assume, come back to us, and then we have to decide what another alternative to use these $400,000 for?
Yes.
Okay. That's fine with me if RTD wants to continue to shoot themselves in the foot. I would say for the time being, I do support staff's recommendation of increasing the service frequency and hours for all of our flex ride service areas. And then we'll see what RTD does. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you. I have a question first about the denials. Is that based on, is there a prioritization of necessary trips where those that are not as necessary are denied, or is like first come, first served, or is it like if the same person's asking for multiple trips? Is there a pattern to the denials?
Yeah, it's all based on an algorithm that's part of the TransDev software that RTD uses. And it is first come, first serve, as I understand it. There are recurring trips that a lot of people that we've found are no-shows, and those actually count as denials. When someone schedules a recurring trip and they don't show up, that's coded as a denial. There isn't a rhyme or reason to the trips. It's all first come, first serve. There's no prioritization, which is probably a weak aspect of the algorithm that's currently being used.
Thank you, Councilmember Anderson. I'll just add to that question. So there is a technical definition around denial. So somebody has to ask for a specific trip at a certain time, and it's considered a denial if it is outside of a 2-hour window of a requested time. So if somebody said, I would like to be at my doctor's appointment at 10 a.m. and they cannot get them there, well, they can also say whether they need to be there at a certain time or they'd like to be picked up at a certain time. So it has to be within that 2-hour window. If they cannot accommodate that trip, it's technically a denial.
Okay, yeah, that's helpful. And I think that prioritization piece is maybe outside this algorithm to making sure we're prioritizing specific needs. Okay, so that's fair. And so I do support pursuing Flex Ride, and it was my understanding from the earlier conversations that we could substantially increase the hours and the number of trips and spend the $400,000 in 1 year, or something in between where we could extend that money for more than 1 year. I would prefer the option of extending it out to the limited increases, to extend it out the 2 or 3 years. That would be my preference, so that we're not just doing a 1-year piece, and then that would maybe give us time to find funding to keep it going if it's proving to be beneficial. And on the only other feedback on the study was Councilmember Lim, when she brought up the part about making sure that we're going to the Broomfield Town Square. I didn't catch that before, that's why we wouldn't go all the way to the Orchard Town Center. So I think that's critical, but we don't know the timing of it yet. So I guess it would be something where we would not add it in until the time came. But I think that is, I would much rather support the locations in Broomfield over the outside of Broomfield locations. So that change, I think I gave feedback to go to the Orchard Town Center before, but I think that it makes more sense to focus on our own town square. So thank you very much. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Councilmember Anderson. Councilmember Delgadillo.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. In terms of feedback, really the only thing I want to echo is thanks to Councilmember Ward for asking that question about Skystone. I'm glad to hear that they would be included. You have a lot of folks over there who are car light or not really driving a ton anymore. So I think it's really critical that we serve that community. Even though they are a little island, they unfortunately get left out of a lot of things. So it's good to see them included. And so with that, I would be supportive of pursuing FlexRide with the understandable concerns from my colleagues about RTD. I hear that, I get that. Let's move forward with this. I think it's probably the best way to serve residents at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Leslie.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Great job. I know this is a very difficult task because there's so many unknowns and because of the shape of Broomfield. Anthem Ranch, of course, many of our constituents there would appreciate the FlexRide program. Of course, a lot would like to have something where they could also go to other places than some specific route, and hopefully FlexRide would allow that. So I support, that part of it. I just think the so many unknowns here and the whole RTD issue puts us in a difficult position. So I just want to encourage you to keep on keeping on. Stay with it. Don't be discouraged if they say no. Let's keep looking for some other ways to do it. But we're a growing county, and our citizens need this. And of course, there's environmental advantages to taking advantage of public service as you're proposing. So I support what you're trying to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Leslie. I'll provide my thoughts on this. So I would agree with the transit study to improve mobility, especially that future community connector bus route. I mean, I think that is something that makes a lot of sense in Broomfield. In the analysis of the transit study, it's clear that there are, of course, trade-offs with the cost, needs, and services of each of those options. So while I would love to see that community connector bus be something that rolls out fairly quickly, I don't believe that Broomfield is currently in a financial state to make those major investments in the capital or operation of a community connector at this time. So moving on to the staff recommendation for the funds being utilized for the FlexRide. I was on council when this proposal was put together. I was actually on the Broomfield Transportation Forum, and Ms. Grant, I remember our conversations when this came about. So this proposal was a council member driven initiative, and I also supported this as a member of the forum. The intent was to better understand the transportation demand and those community needs to hopefully then fund a pilot program that would find solutions to those community needs and that demand. At the time, I think the possible solution was adding to the current transit options or augmenting the current transit options, such as utilizing Uber or Lyft. When I look at this lens, I don't know if that was the intent, but of course that was the intent back in 2019, and a whole lot of things have changed since then. The way in which we work, the way in which we commute, things like that. So those things are very different. So perhaps given that, we might have come to this kind of a conclusion anyway. So my big question is, does this use of expanding the FlexRide enhancements adhere to that grant award from DRCOG? So that's kind of my big question is will this use adhere to that grant the grant that we got from DRCOG?
I believe so. I'll hand this over to Sarah actually to discuss.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Schaaf. Sarah Grant, Transportation Manager. And yes, I remember the initiation of this project with the Broomfield Transportation Forum. And with this project was to identify the gaps and the needs. And with the data analysis that we collected with our consultant team, looking at the travel needs, not only just people taking transit currently, but also what are the general travel demands and needs throughout the day and where are they going? And what we did find is that folks are traveling later into the evening. Then transit is available. They're also traveling on the weekends, needing to get to places. And so the FlexRide services that are proposed do meet that. And I think that this study provides a strong foundation to advocate for RTD for longer service hours, increased capacity. As we mentioned, the denials that we're experiencing on FlexRide is a gap. That means that people are asking for trips. They're not able to take those trips. And so by asking for longer hours, capacity on the service rides, and then also on the weekends helps meet those needs. In terms of the use of taxis or transportation network companies, since we brought to you this first draft in May, we've taken that feedback and also looked at some of the feedback that we got on phase 2. And we did include trip support as a potential option to look for and something to explore, but we would want to be sure that we were looking at very specific trip purposes for certain demographics, certain needs, certain destinations, and be putting some parameters around what those trip needs are. And we have identified a few of those. But as we mentioned earlier tonight, that any program that we would initiate with this pilot would need sustained funds ongoing. And so we would need to look at that carefully. And if that were to be pursued, that a certain budget and dollar amount could be sustained into the long term. And so that is something for council's consideration for future budget decisions.
Okay, I appreciate that. And I think that, you had kind of answered my second question, which was, is this really a pilot program? And I get kind of what you're saying in that this is an expanded, service of FlexRide, and that is the pilot, right? What information do we gather during this pilot to say, are we addressing those issues and complaints that we heard during the public engagement opportunities? So from that lens, I see what you're saying on this. And I think Councilmember Henkel, she made this point, we've got to collect that data, but we've also got to understand, what data do we need to collect in order to address those complaints and those issues that, came up during those public engagement opportunities. So I hope that we develop that if we do move forward with this, and that we are collecting that data on the back end. And just a question that popped into my mind, in terms of expanding FlexRide, this isn't the first time that we've talked or that we've actually expanded FlexRide service within Broomfield. We've expanded it geographically, I think, before, but maybe this would be the first time that we would do that in terms of time. Is that correct?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Schaaf. Yes, so we have, so with the same tip round back in 2020 that the Transportation Forum approved, we have fully expended those funds, but we did expand the North Broomfield service area, which is implemented and no longer being funded by the grant, but RTD has folded that into their daily operations. Same thing with Saturday service. When we proposed this to RTD with the Transportation Improvement Program, the TIP funding, RTD staff was very skeptical at the time that it would be successful because they don't have many FlexRide services that operate with success on the weekends. But lo and behold, we were able to implement that even through COVID. We were able to kind of get through that initial time with RTD where they weren't expanding services, but they were able to implement that Saturday service. They were actually very impressed with the ridership that we're getting. Some months we were seeing as many as 4 trips per hour, which is double the RTD expectation on RTD FlexRide. So they did sustain that service and it's no longer being paid by the grant, and RTD has taken into their daily operations using the taxpayer money out of our base system to pay for that.
So it seems like that while there may be some hesitancy or some fears around RTD that, in the past, we've seen some success in locally working with RTD and some of those initiatives, some of those ideas that have come forward. Not only has RTD done and successfully done, but now they are funding those solely out of RTD funds instead of that local match. So I hope that the same success that we had in the past continues with the expanded FlexRide. And so I support that as well. Looking at my council colleagues, I believe that everybody was in favor of this, or at least the majority. Is there anybody that didn't have a chance to provide your feedback and direction to staff regarding the use of the pilot funds for the FlexRide enhancements? All right, seeing none, I think that is the direction, is that utilize those pilot funds for the FlexRide enhancements. Is there anything else from staff that we needed on this topic?
No, thank you.
Excellent. Well, that concludes the agenda items for this evening's study session. Is there any other business to come before council from my council colleagues or staff? And seeing none, there being no further business, the study session is adjourned. Council will convene for executive session immediately following this